Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. On March 4th, the Bloomington City Council met and discussed a resolution establishing full transparency with flock safety technology. Council President Isa Kasari explained the purpose of this resolution.
The central question before us is not whether public safety matters. Of course it does. I think the question is how we pursue it, what capabilities we build, what risks we accept, what limits we place on ourselves when technology expands the reach of institutional power. I think generally that we should avoid a common trap in technology, which is this sort of idea that any potential benefit, no matter how small, is sufficient justification for something. When we're dealing with tools that collect large amounts of data of any sort, or particularly location-linked information about residents and visitors, many of whom are not suspected of wrongdoing, it might help sometimes, cannot be our governing standard. Benefits should be demonstrated, not presumed, and they should decisively outweigh the civil liberties, security, and governance risks that are created by the system itself. So the resolution before you tonight is intended as a first step toward responsible governance in this space. It does three things. First, it establishes a shared premise that technologies capable of collecting large volumes of location-based data require a higher level of transparency and democratic oversight than ordinary municipal tools. Second, it initiates a structured process of inquiry. It asks for a public briefing and written materials so that the council and the community can understand the program as it exists today, its scope, its cost, its retention policies, its access controls, its auditing practices, and its data sharing pathways. In other words, the due diligence required to make informed decisions in daylight. I will note here that several members of the public submitted to us a sort of shared, a joint written report noting multiple times where they have sought information under the Freedom of Information Act and that's been obscured or not accessible to them in certain cases. And third, it signals the council's intent to develop durable and enforceable rules governing ALPR and similar technologies in Bloomington, rules that would apply regardless of vendor. Now this point I think is quite important. I know that right now the sort of reaction is to a particular vendor, and I have particular thoughts about the particular vendor, but we need to think in a broader sense that it's not just maybe a concern with this vendor, but about the use and governance of this technology in Bloomington sort of at all. And so to me, the deeper question is whether institutions are prepared to govern technologies that will only become more powerful and more common over time. And so I think this is sort of the first sort of first step here, and it's the spirit in which this resolution was drafted, and I look forward to the discussion.
Bloomington residents expressed their concern with the contract between the city and Flock. The company's technology is capable of tracking a person's movements using license plate scanners and facial recognition. Residents say that they are suspicious of the actual purpose of the Flock contract and worry about government transparency. Community members say that they believe this program will be used in cooperation with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Local resident Susan Brackney voiced her opinion during public comment.
This issue is bigger than just that camera. Focusing on Bloomington's use of one system or one company in isolation is not enough. If you use Flock's technology alongside facial recognition software, you've got yourself a live, real-time dragnet.
Bloomington resident Joffrey Livingston also expressed his concern.
I want to reiterate that transparency about these contracts should be a given. Transparency should be an inherent part of the relationship between people and government. And there will be many criticisms levied against Flock and ALPRs in general tonight, but I think the reality is that we must, once again, I also want to reiterate that the council does not make this decision. The mayor, who was present in this room and is no longer present in this room for just this item alone, is the one who makes this decision, but we must divest from this contract.
Sarah Owen, the Community Engagement Coordinator for Exodus Refugee Immigration Office in Bloomington, explained the impact on the immigrant community.
Exodus is here tonight to make clear to the City Council and to the Mayor that we are asking for the Flock contract to be terminated in full. With regard to this ongoing discussion about the contract, we ask you to consider everyone's investment in the matter. Firstly, Flock is a private company selling you a product so they can make a profit, and that is the extent of their interest in this matter. The language on their website is simply a matter of PR. They state that Flock does not share data with ICE. That does not mean that ICE or the federal government does not have access to that data. In fact, there is already a clear and established pattern that is happening across the country, and following these comments today, Exodus will be providing documentation of that pattern to the council. The BPD is tasked with public safety and therefore advocates for the use of Flock cameras for the sake of investigating crimes. However, we respectfully contend that they may not be considering the larger ramifications. To be clear, we empathize with the objectives of maintaining public safety, but the more that our city invests in data collection, allies with profit-driven companies, and fails to take a firm stand on our community's basic rights, the less likely our immigrant community will feel safe to utilize police for when they themselves are victims of a crime.
Following public comment, council members had the opportunity to make their own statements. Councilman Dave Rollo demonstrated his support for the resolution.
Remembering such things as the Patriot Act, which this council opposed back in 2003, and just this steadily normalization of government secrecy, erosion of free speech, dissenters being targeted, all that contextually is important. So we're essentially living in a society where total surveillance is the goal, and it is real. That is the hallmark of a totalitarian state. So to whatever extent we can push back, we have to do it. I don't want to live in a digital panopticon. I don't think anyone should. So I appreciate this council resolution, our council president Asari's resolution, very well thought out. Wonder if it goes far enough. I think that the case has been made tonight that we don't need this. We don't need Flock cameras, and we should think of defunding it. And so that's what I look to as the next step.
The council unanimously approved the resolution, saying it will promote greater transparency and pause the expansion of Flock technology. The Richland Township and Town of Ellettsville Reorganization Committee met on March 4th. During public comment, resident Phil Shawnoff shared concerns about the fire protection arrangement between Ellettsville and Richland Township.
I guess a question is, if or can Ellettsville town government and Monroe County government get together and agree upon a fire protection territory that satisfies Ellettsville's fire department debt while continuing to provide fire protection services for both townships, Bean Blossom and Richland, and the town.
Shawnoff suggested Monroe County and Ellettsville governments try to reach an agreement. Committee member William Ellis said that the fire protection issue came about after the reorganization plans began, and the county indicated it wanted to move to a new fire district.
The reason we decided to pursue reorganization was the state has talked about streamlining government, duplication of services, and there was some from the township and the town. Richland Township and Ellettsville has a 79-year history with fire protection. So that was a good blueprint for us. We were already kind of married, there. And the county decided, while we're in the middle of pursuing this process, to take that away from us. They gave the intention that they wanted to do a fire district, which is different than a fire territory. Right now, we just have a contract. And what that would do, when you're worried about increased taxes, with this plan, your taxes, it would increase taxes a lot more than what it would than reorganization if they did a fire district, because they'd have to build a station. They would have to build buy equipment, because right now Ellettsville owns that.
Shawnoff also expressed concern about how the reorganization might affect other county-provided services, such as road maintenance, snow removal, and stormwater management. Ellis said that the town would take control of services like roads and fire protection, and the town could use funding already in place from the county. The committee moved on to discuss finalized subcommittee reports. Sandy Hash with the Finance Subcommittee talked about funding sources for the reorganized area.
This plan anticipates that the property tax rates for the police, cumulative fire building and equipment, cumulative capital development, and the existing debt service will be applied exclusively to the properties within the current boundaries of the town of Ellettsville. Conversely, tax rates for the town administration, park recreation, and fire will be levied across all properties in the consolidated area. The township assistance tax rate will apply to the properties situated in Richland, in Ellettsville, Richland, and Richland. Taxing districts will, rate is allocated to those properties. Funding for other services will primarily derive from local income tax, service charges, wheel tax, and gas revenues.
Hash said that the town and the township budgets will increase.
But when you compare between the 26 certified property tax levies and rates with the projections after the reorganization, the impact on the property tax bills is expected to be 6.9% for Richland Township, 4.1% for Ellettsville, Richland, 3.4% for Ellettsville, Bean Blossom. And I think the difference in that is they have their own township tax, so that we aren't involved with them on the township part in Bean Blossom. A $300,000 home in Richland Township is expected to see a $173 tax increase, while the same value home in Ellettsville will not really have any change because in Ellettsville, the tax rate is substantially higher than the tax rate in the county. So the people in Ellettsville will hit the circuit breakers at $300,000, so they won't see any increase in taxes.
Hash said reorganization will provide long-term financial advantages, such as structured service expansion, a broader tax base, and coordinated planning for land use and economic growth. It would also create a single, simplified budget process. Ellettsville resident and Parks, Recreation, and Cemeteries Subcommittee member Jim Perry asked about the impact of 2025 Senate Enrolled Act 1 on local income tax and taxation structure.
I would personally like to see some comparisons, particularly in terms of projected financial implications that involve more than simply a property tax, because we're not billed only on property tax under SB 1, and we don't have the choice to change that, I presume.
I don't.
Hash said that the Financial Subcommittee report accounts for cigarette tax and excise tax, as well as property tax and local income tax. However, she said that the income tax rates for 2028 and onward are not yet known. Ellis said that any projections beyond 2027 are uncertain because the state could change tax rules again.
I never look at rate. I look at what the increase is in actual dollars, because I've said, people have heard it, when you go pay your mortgage or pay a bill,
Right.
you don't pay by rate, you pay by dollars. So I try to focus on a budget that has the least impact from what you pay this year to what you pay next year.
Ellis said the committee does not yet have all the answers, but it appreciates community input as it consolidates subcommittee reports into a final reorganization plan. The next meeting of the Richland Township and Town of Ellettsville Reorganization Committee will be held on March 18th. The Bloomington Redevelopment Commission met on March 2nd. CEO of Amplify Bloomington, John Fernandez, provided updates on the Forge apartment complex in the Trades District.
We've really got a very stable financial position right now with the Forge. It's doing really well. In fact, it's doing so well that we're paying back the Redevelopment Commission's, the city's $100,000 operating fund reserve that you all approved as part of our Trades District Management Agreement amendment. That, if it didn't happen today, it's happening this week.
The committee then discussed approving a Summit District Economic Development Plan and establishing a related residential housing district. City Attorney Dana Kerr said that designating the Summit District could improve Bloomington's infrastructure.
Those roads are very much necessary to connect this overall development to the rest of Bloomington and provide some infrastructure that will support Bloomington as a whole. For instance, Adams Street, connecting it will now give another direct line from Bloomfield Road all the way to Taft Road. So this really helps connectivity. It'll help the connectivity for traffic flow to and from the EDA.
Kerr further said that approving the plan could benefit the entire city.
We all know that Bloomington is landlocked, and so we must take great care in dealing with the project or the land that we do have within the city limits, which includes all of this area here. And so by providing the TIF and generating revenue, that revenue can be used to help spur this development in ways that it wouldn't happen without it. And again, the wonderful thing is the interconnectivity of the infrastructure is going to be a humongous benefit for all of the Bloomington, for the southwest quadrant of Bloomington.
This motion passed unanimously. Later in the meeting, Kerr requested approval of an agreement with Sudbury Development Partners for the Summit District Planned Unit Development and Public Infrastructure Improvements. Kerr stressed the importance and costs of roads.
We wanted in this agreement, in case for some reason, Summit didn't happen quite like what we wanted to, we wanted to make sure that those right-of-ways were available for the construction of those roads, because those roads, again, are so important.
This motion passed 4-1. The Bloomington Redevelopment Commission will meet again on March 16th. The Monroe County Board of Zoning Appeals met on March 4th. The board began by reviewing the Fisk front yard setback, a proposal to remodel a property in the Geode Triangle subdivision.
During the review of the proposed site plan, it was also found that the proposed walkway and boardwalk will need to cross over an area of 25% slope or greater, as shown in Exhibit 5 of the staff packet. In addition, the petitioner is proposing a temporary construction path on the west side of the home, which will be removed and replaced with seed and straw following the construction. The purpose of the construction path down to the lake is for access of construction equipment, and the petitioner has confirmed that this land disturbance will be temporary.
The petitioner spoke to the board.
The stimulus for why we're here is that when we purchased the home, we noticed and discovered a lot of major issues, actually pre-purchase. And that was okay because we got a little bit of a savings on the cost, but there were some problems with the home, and then we've lived in it for 14 years now and kind of monitored that. And now we're at a point where we want to fix those problems, and then after we fix it, then we want to update it and then live in it full time.
The board approved this motion 4-0. The Board of Zoning Appeals will meet again on April 1st. The Monroe County Election Board met on March 5th to discuss logistics for the upcoming primary election. Board members tackled candidate filing procedures, early voting, and progress on the county's new election operations location. Democratic Chair Penny Githens shared concerns about a candidate filing form that had allegedly been altered prior to submission with a name change.
I was surprised to hear that because at our training that we all attended in December, we were told that a candidate cannot go in and change. So I was in contact with the Indiana Election Division, and it is not allowed for anyone in any circumstance to change a form that has been filed in this situation where someone signs an oath, so they are not to have changes in the clerk's office on any forms, even after the candidate has signed the form. So I realize that may have been a policy in the past, but I want to ensure that going forward that does not get repeated.
The board discussed whether the alteration constituted fraud. County Clerk Nicole Brown said that she does not believe it would. Election Supervisor Kylie Ferris maintained the previous policy allowed editing forms for accuracy, including name changes. She encouraged the election board to develop a new policy.
I just don't want fraud to be committed.
No, I don't think
There
anybody.
was no fraud. There was no fraud.
According to a lawyer I spoke with, that constitutes fraud. Alter a
There
form
was
like
no
that.
fraud.
But it has happened, what happened has happened in the past.
Yeah, so in the past, it has been handled that if an individual forgets a piece of information, and it's generally a simple piece of information, not a, like for this instance, it was a name. They forgot to put their name on it, but we had the rest of their candidate filings with those and had their signature on it, so it was added. Should have had an initial next to it. In the past, that's how it has been handled. Also, it has been that we will call the candidate sometimes if they leave off a piece of information, and they will tell us to make the change, and then we would just initial next to it. Those are both things that have been done in the past. And then we had brought up during that last meeting that if we want to set a new policy, I think it would be best to come from the election board to set that policy, and then we can move forward with that. That way we have a set change, and it can be ran from here on out.
I don't want to make it any harder than it has to be, but we want to make sure that there are no questions when it's done.
Correct.
Okay.
Then the board moved on to early voting plans. Election officials say they are planning for high turnout during early voting. Ferris said they will set up early voting for full capacity.
We also do want to make sure that if there is a chance of us having a bigger turnout than expected, then we need to be able to increase that. So I have talked with Bob White on going ahead and setting up early voting at full capacity. So we'll have 10 poll books, 6 print devices, and 5 checkouts set up in case if they are needed at any point during early voting. That way we're not having to try to set up equipment overnight, and it takes a good amount of time to get that set up. I want to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible and making it as smooth as possible for the early voting session. And then also for Election Day, I have those numbers in there for you guys. I have Election Day for primary and general. That is leaving us with backup poll books. And if we do decide after the early voting, if we need to increase some of the locations for workers, then we can do that as well.
Ferris shared updated voter registration numbers for the county.
As of today, we are currently sitting at 75,081 active registered voters, 14,659 inactive, bringing us to a total of 89,740 registered voters in Monroe County. On this information, I wanted to bring this up because we will be getting ready to print out postcards and sending those out in the mail with everybody's updated information for their polling location based on the 28 polling locations and reassigning precincts.
Next, Monroe County Building and Fleet Director Richard Kreider updated the board on construction at the county's new election facility. The new election headquarters and early voting site will be on the first level of the Showers Building at 501 North Morton Street.
This week we completed the building inspection, and it passed. We also completed the fire inspection. It also passed. The occupancy number has been officially determined by the fire marshal. That's an important milestone in this project. And it gave us the ability to host this morning's event. The punch list with the architect and contractor happened yesterday. The early voting area, that space it's very close to completion. We're actually just a few doorknobs away from getting that finished up. And based on where things stand today, I think we're comfortably on track for the April 7th target date.
Clerk Brown said there may be technical difficulties, particularly with the phone lines. Ferris responded that county election officials are working on the issue.
I kind of just want to mention there still are some glitches not to do with you, but glitches that could translate to the voting public. One of them is the phones. As I understand it, we have one phone line
So we have updated the county website to add a second number, but those phones, the 2 lines that we have, if a second caller comes in, they do get pushed to voicemail. So we're still working through those kinks, but me and Richard have been working together on trying to come up with some solutions for that.
So right now, my recollection is I called 2612 and it is not operable.
Correct, but so we're working on getting ABS set up downstairs where phones will be able to be connected, and they'll also have their computers connected to internet as well. Once they are down there, that line will then be operable again.
And that will be?
Hopefully Monday.
Okay. And so I would just encourage voters who have questions to pack their patience. You know, in terms of the calls rolling over into voicemail, nobody likes to get that. But that's where we are, and there's nothing that we can be doing differently.
The board also approved the list of polling locations for the upcoming election. All 28 former polling locations have agreed to serve again this year. The next county election board meeting will take place on April 2nd. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.